Thanks, everybody, for joining. All right, so I think a lot of what this conference is focused on is technical systems. And I'm going to start there, but really the focus of this talk is more about teams. But in both cases, I'm going to be talking about them through the lens of systems thinking. So technical systems in organizations obviously can be quite large and composed of many smaller systems, each of those systems having their own characteristics, components, goals. And reliability engineering focuses on creating resilience, creating systems, feedback loops, using tools to make sure that those systems stay up and running. And importantly, that they make a lot of noise if they aren't working. I think that in general, a lot of strong teams that I've seen have fairly clearly defined processes for when those systems do fail, because they will. And strong teams tend to be able to reach for something quickly right when they think there's a problem. In one example, in a previous role, I worked for a company that sold cars online. And generally what would happen is my teams at that company were focused on sort of the last touch point of the experience. We were focused on systems that helped make sure that when the car was meant to be delivered to the customer, everything was ready for that to happen. So in the best case scenario, the car would be at the delivery center it was supposed to be at. The delivery driver would be on site and ready to deliver the car. The customer would be where they were supposed to be at the address that we were aware of. The car would then get delivered. The customer would be super happy. And we managed a few systems and had integrations that made that possible. But I came in one day and realized that probably something had gone wrong. And I knew this because we had an incident process and I landed right in the middle of it. I came in and already there was a Slack channel. Already I was added by someone, and already there was some context in that channel to start figuring out what was going on. So I went and gathered context to understand whether it was my teams, whether somebody needed to jump in, and understood pretty quickly that actually, yes, it's very, very likely that we needed to take the lead. So one of the managers sort of took the lead on it and started the investigation and also started figuring out a mitigation as quickly as possible. Because what had happened once we gathered context and as we started getting into the investigation is that for this particular scenario, the car was where it was meant to be, and we knew where the customer was, and they were in the right place. But our delivery center rang us up and said, the delivery manifest for today lists drivers who are on holiday, and so we don't have anybody to deliver these cars. These are big purchases, and people wait a long time to get them. So the last thing we want is for somebody who's potentially taken a day off work to then have to take another day off work because our system went sideways. So the process continued. The manager took the lead, worked with engineers to figure out what we could do manually to get those customers happy as quickly as possible, and then figure out where in the system things went wrong. And it was clear enough after some investigation that one of our third-party integrations, webhooks just went down silently overnight, which hadn't happened before. But it meant that we didn't have the leave data for delivery drivers, and we were building manifests off of the wrong information. Once we figured it out and the situation stabilized, and then the team, the lead for the incident, booked in the postmortem. And we use blameless postmortems as a way to learn from failure and to understand whether we need to make any changes. So if you haven't participated in a blameless postmortem, generally, the focus is on what were the contributions to the failure, not what was the root cause, because there's very rarely only one. It's also on learning, not blaming. It's focused on defining work that will increase the reliability of the system that failed, identifying any processes that need to change, and then really importantly, capturing learnings for other teams so that if they're in the situation, they can gain some knowledge. So great, the process worked, kicked off, people knew what to do, people knew their roles, the incident, for all intents and purposes, resolved, the work was defined, added to the backlog, the team prioritized that so that in the future, we reduce the risk that this would happen again, which is great. How many of you have ever participated in an incident process that looks anything like this, or blameless postmortems in any capacity? Exactly. So businesses see a lot of value in running this kind of process because there's a lot of cost behind failures of these kinds, and businesses don't want to incur those costs, and they want to keep customers happy. But what about when systems that fail aren't technical in nature? What about when the system isn't a third-party webhook? Generally, from my experience, if there's a failure in the organization and it's not down to a piece of tech, it's going to be related to teams in some way, and also when it is related to tech, to be fair. Teams, just like the tech we build, are complex systems. They are made of many moving parts. Specifically from a systems thinking lens, teams can be classified as complex adaptive systems, which make them an interesting breed of systems. I'm going to go through a definition and then we'll go through some examples. But essentially, as a team, a complex adaptive system is made up of many agents. And those agents interact with each other at a local level. The system emerges from those interactions. And really what it means is that a complex adaptive system is always going to be greater than the sum of its parts. So you can take a bunch of people working independently and interacting with each other, and from that, a system will emerge. Some examples to make it more concrete. You can see this most straightforward in biology. So many animals naturally form complex adaptive systems. Our bodies have a number of complex adaptive systems. If you look at climate over time, things like traffic flow, all of these are situations where you have individual agents that are interacting with one another, and a system emerges because of those interactions. So taking it slightly more concretely with one of the canonical examples for complex adaptive systems is ants and ant colonies. So I haven't thought much about ant colonies in a while, but for this talk I did. And in a complex adaptive ant colony, you have ants, which are the agents, and each of those agents has a role, maybe a forager, maybe helps build things, and those roles are diverse. So you have heterogeneous agents, bunch of different abilities. Each of those ants interacts with other ants. Mostly, ants interact locally. So you'll have one-on-one interaction or small group interaction, but it's mostly local. And those local interactions drive out rules and they drive out behavior. So between the two of us, here's how we operate. Between the two of us, here's how we operate. And over time, those interactions start to form rules and decisions at a local level. And the cool thing about complex adaptive systems is that those local interactions then start to create a bigger system. So the colony emerges from the behavior of the ants. And those agents, those ants, are doing lots of things, and the colony builds up. And then the colony itself, because it's made of many, many agents, becomes adaptive and resilient. But it also has its own life cycle. The colony will exist and not exist, all in a cycle of its own from the individual ants themselves. But everything about it, from the ants up to the colony, is constantly adapting. And the interesting thing about this kind of system is that you can't look at what a single ant is doing and understand the colony. It's impossible, because the colony emerges from interactions. It can't be a simple reduction of, this is what one ant is doing, this is what the colony is doing. But we were talking about teams, not ants. So if we apply that to teams and you think about organizations, teams themselves are complex, adaptive systems where a team member is that agent, and the team member will have a role. Sometimes those roles are shared. Sometimes every person has a different role. But team members, most of what they do is interact locally. Your conversations, your work, you're not always going to be operating at a team level. You're going to be doing lots of local things. You're going to be building lots of local information, making lots of local decisions as a team member. But as all of those local interactions happen over time, the team emerges as a system. So those behaviors drive out the definition and shape of the team as a system. So the team itself depends on the members and the interactions they're doing, but the team also has its own life cycle. It itself is adaptive and robust. So again, 2 levels of adaptation and evolution. And again, you can't understand a team by looking at the behavior of individual team members. It's false connection. So when you look at what a single person or even just 2 people are doing on a team, you can't understand what is going on in the team. So complex abstract systems like teams require that you look at multiple levels and that you think holistically about the system, not just the individual parts. One of the best characteristics that I found about complex adaptive systems is that they operate at the edge of chaos. And when I read that, I was like, I'm on a team right now that I think embodies the idea of operating at the edge of chaos. What that means is sometimes it's labeled as organized complexity, but teams, if you think about it, are always evolving. If you think about a team, there's no end point. There's always change, but you never arrive. There's constant evolution. There's chaos, but it's controlled and it's organized. And that tension is really important, because having the chaos, but also having order around it, means that the team can adapt and that the team is more likely to be resilient to change or problems. So, if we think about a specific team, so I'll talk about the team that I'm on right now. I'm part of a 7-person startup, quite different to the company that sold cars online, because we are pre-product market fit. So we are very much casting wide nets and trying to find people to talk to and learn from. As a company and as a team, we have collaborative values, vision, and strategy, but we also have chaos. We have many, many different types of work in flight at any given point. We have many things we're trying to achieve, and we're always looking for ways to learn. I think operating at the edge of chaos in our system probably looks familiar to you all in your teams as well, but a lot of the tools that we use on a daily basis are homegrown, and they've changed a lot since I joined a year ago, and I can't even try to predict what they will look like a year from now. But we have all of the markers of a lean, agile, whatever you want to call it, product team, where we have stand-ups, we have retrospectives, we have OKRs that we evaluate on a predictable cadence, we have customer funnels that are exposed for everyone to have that information, we have feedback and metrics, we have tools to shape work that comes in, we do pair programming and test-driven development. So all of these things, in my mind, help create the order in the chaos that is our day-to-day as we're trying to achieve something in a group of 7. But back to this idea of failure, all of those things are things we have in place to avoid failure. Those are all the mechanisms and tools we use so that we expose information, so that people can weigh in, give their opinions, share their thoughts. But I was inspired to do this talk not because of a week that looked great, but instead because of a week that I think we failed as a team. And I think the reason we failed, actually, is because we crossed over from that nice land of the edge of chaos, where there was enough order that things kept moving, and we crossed over into just pure disorganized chaos. But I'm going to tell a simplified narrative of one of the markers of what happened that week. So last September, second week of last September, we were, as I mentioned, doing lots of work. Everybody on the team was busy, and I was personally working on an internal workshop for people to try out to get some feedback, but there was also this demo in flight. And so at Stand Up, one of our touch points to make sure we were organized, people would say, hey, I'm going to work on the demo. This demo was interesting to me, even though I needed to work on the workshops, because I wanted to know about the tech. I wanted to know what kind of decisions we were making. It was the first kind of work like this that we were doing, so it felt really important to me. So at Stand Up, on day 1, it was like, oh, who's doing the demo? Okay, well we're going to start on the demo, some other pair. And I was like, oh, do you think you're making decisions? Because if so, I just want to join and then I'll drop. It's fine. They're like, no, we're just exploring. It's fine. Don't worry. Okay, fine. All right, great. The next day, during a break, I had finished a workshop, and so I dropped into our shared Zoom and heard a conversation. And I think, actually, sorry, this slide is what I would have hoped to have happened, which is we're not making decisions. It's all good. And then, oh, now we are making decisions at this local level, and Winna was interested, and she broadcasts that, so let's go grab her. And then I come, and I learn things, and then I go, and the system is great. But what actually happened is what I started talking about just then, which is day 1, oh, we'll take the demo. Oh, but we're not making decisions. Great. Day 2, hey, what are you talking about in here? I just dropped in for a minute. We're talking about the demo. Are you making decisions, or is it just exploring? Oh, no, it's just exploring. That's fine. Okay, great. So I'd drop out, whatever. Day 3, how's that demo going? You all are still just exploring, right? Because I wanted to be part of that. Not making decisions? No, definitely not making decisions. Cool. So then Friday, we had a stand-up. And in stand-up, everybody who had touched into that work decided they were going to get together and have a sync. And again, I said, are you making decisions in this sync, or are you just exploring? Don't worry, we're just syncing. We're not making any decisions. Fine. That's fine. So I went off and did some work. And a couple hours later, was rejoined by this subgroup. And the first thing they said was, all right, so for this demo, what we're going to do is, and I have to tell you, this is the point where I think I broke my team. In my head, I had quite a strong reaction. I listened for a while, hoping to get some indication that actually the decisions hadn't been made, and like, this is the team I know and I trust, and we have systems and behavior, and this is not like this team. We wouldn't do this. No, it's fine. I'll just wait until it comes up. It didn't come up. They had made decisions. They had moved on, and I was pissed. And in my head, I was spiraling. And so by the end of the meeting, I took a deep breath and came off mute and very crisply said, I feel really surprised by this update. Actually, I feel upset, excluded, and disappointed. And then, everybody helped me resolve things, and we moved forward, and it was fantastic. That's not at all what happened, actually. It was absolute silence in the room. I dropped this bomb, I looked around, and everybody's like, I don't know what to do or say right now. Meanwhile, I was like, I can't believe my team members let me down so much, and there was a lot of existential dread, and it was a bad moment on our team. So if we're thinking about complex adaptive systems, things fell over, because at that point, we had an incident, and this is what happened. So I rocked up to this sink and said, excuse me, you excluded me. I don't like that. And as a group on this Zoom call, it was crickets, which is fantastic. We ended the Zoom call for lunch, and then immediately, 7 of us, 6 people sent me direct messages. How are you? I'm so glad you said something. Did I do anything? What's going on? I was like, what is happening right now? Why are we in this world where you're not broadcasting the questions and helping me out and backing me up? I stopped. I didn't respond to anyone. I turned my brain off, I got some lunch, I got a book, and I shut down. So effectively, as a complex system, as an agent in that system, I went offline. I was no longer participating, I was no longer active to move things forward in our shared goal. In the afternoon, things did not recover. I thought in the back of my head, maybe after lunch, everybody else will have calm down, and then suddenly we'll have a really productive conversation, but I'm not doing it because I already put myself out there today. We came back from lunch. No one said anything. I did very little after lunch. I talked to other people who were also doing very little after lunch. So effectively, every part of our system was stalling. We had a retrospective on the calendar because, as I mentioned, those are part of the tools that we have to make sure that our system stays organized enough and doesn't devolve into chaos. We all showed up for the retrospective. I said 0 things, and we talked about nothing that happened during the week. And then we went home. Immediately, for me, the reaction was that trust gone. And that's the thing with complex adaptive systems, is that a small thing, the butterfly effect, if you've heard of it, a small thing can happen that will have a profoundly unexpected effect. So in this case, a small innocuous group sync ended up making me feel completely unsafe. It made everyone on the team confused about what was going on. Worry and anxiety was pervasive. I was thinking, like, what am I even doing here? This was the wrong choice. What was I thinking? This is terrible. And over the weekend, I ended up meeting up with another engineer to process everything. In general, this was like, this is awful. In the face of our first team as a system failure at this company, we did not do a good job. And that was okay. But in the moment, it really felt like the world was ending, and I felt very disappointed. I felt very despondent. I felt very hopeless. I processed it out loud. I thought, and I was like, I have to quit. Maybe I should quit technology. Maybe I'm just broken. I can't believe this happened. But again, the great thing about complexity in complex systems is that information is the way out of problems. And making sure that incentives are there for people to share things and for people to weigh in honestly makes sure that you get good answers to your problems. The other thing is that as a system and as an agent in that system, as we talked about, constant evolution and adaptation. So as a single member, single agent on the team, I went from, I believe in this team, to, oh my God, you all disappointed me, I have to quit, to, okay, maybe I should take a step back, talk to somebody, have an interaction with someone, understand a little bit, and go from there. So I started to adapt. I talked to the other female principal engineer on the team, which I felt very lucky to have as a sounding board. And we discussed what had happened and our contexts and our knowledge and our opinions, and it helped me reframe my thoughts. It helped me step back off the ledge. It helped me say, okay, no, actually, the system broke, but the agents are all good people. There was a reason I joined this group of 7, and there's a reason that I want to see this team succeed. I'm not ready to call it yet. So at that point, I started to think about, okay, well, what do we do? Because I can't handle Monday being like Friday. That's not going to work. So as an agent in this complex adaptive system, I take my past experiences and help that inform what I choose to do in this system. And in this case, I thought about the successful approach to a technical failure and whether we could adapt that as a cultural tool here for our team. So that's what we did, really. I rocked up on Monday, and by that point I was ready to put myself out there again, and I said, this weekend sucked. I was miserable. I was thinking about work all weekend long, but not in a good way. I don't ever want to do that, and I especially don't want to do it in the sense of wondering whether I fit and wondering what I did wrong and wondering what's wrong with me. And immediately my manager, who had been a manager before, who was a big reason why I joined, was like, I agree. I was moving this weekend and all I could think about was this team and where we went wrong and what we needed to do. Immediately, my hope buoyed. Immediately, I felt like the system was changing. People were interacting in positive ways. We were sharing what we were thinking and what was going on. So we put it out there, like, we should do this at a group level. We should have a conversation. I'd like to facilitate it as a postmortem. Any crazy objections? And in general, everybody's like, no, please can we not stay in Friday land? Please, we all want to move forward from that. So I think the biggest realization I had in terms of thinking about our team as a system is we are constantly adapting, we are constantly evolving, and my experience in technology, especially as a woman, is that I've had a lot of scares. I've been in a lot of systems that weren't supportive of me, that weren't safe, that truly did not have the best of intentions, and in that moment I had this panic that I didn't fit. And thinking about the team as an adaptive system made me realize that actually I didn't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We could, as a team, use a tool to talk about what was going on at the team level and start to recover some of the trust and the safety and all of the sort of sign markers that I was looking for and the reasons that I came to the team in the first place. So if you're on a team, and most of you are probably on teams, larger companies, bigger than just 7 people, which means you probably have teams of teams with agents, which means a whole lot of fun and chaos. I recommend thinking about the tools that you have in your day-to-day as engineers, if that's your role, and how you diagnose systems, and think about whether you can apply that to a more complex, unwieldy, but quite interesting system like a team. And I will finish with, I had a lot of doubt about whether anyone would whether this would resonate with anyone. And it took me a while to be like, you know what, I'm just going to share it, it's fine. And I started thinking about other situations where I didn't cause the issue, but looking back at it, actually something like a cultural postmortem could have been productive at a team level to help the team move forward. So I thought about when somebody on the team got unexpectedly angry and aggressive and walked out of the office at 9 a.m. with no explanation. I thought about when our team missed updates for 5 weeks in a row and we got flack for not giving visibility into what we were doing. Team meetings being steamrolled by 1 or 2 negative voices, or times when teams got surprised by expectations from people outside of the team about what the team needed to deliver. And I think once I started putting the system lens, I think that actually a postmortem could work as a facilitation tool for any of these kinds of conversations to expose all of the things that are happening on teams where this is the behavior you see. Because in every single one of these situations, this was one sign, but actually there were many, many, many forces at play. So maybe you can think of other situations, and maybe trying something like this with your team would be helpful. So hopefully I gave you some food for thought.